baby, Rivka Sweedler, and I'm 60 years old.
And I'm Jerry Sweedler, and I'm 73, which would make me the elder statesman, of course.
And I'm Harriet Miller, and I am 70. Do you remember on Avenue C in the backyard, the barbecue pit that had the big sides to it that were our horses? And Chucky came to visit, and I remember I was so thrilled to have Chucky visit us because he was younger than me, but bigger than you, so I could tie him up, and he was, I captured Chucky in his youth.
Yeah, Chucky really ran me ragged. He was smaller than I was, but he'd force me to chase him. He'd get me mad, and I had asthma. So we'd get half a block, and I was out.
Yeah. So Avenue C was the house we shared with you.
Yeah, and there was a piano.
Yes. Well, when the war was over, Dad said we could each have a wish, and he would grant the wish. Mother wanted a baby. Ta-da. I wanted a piano. I got it. What did you want, for heaven's sakes? A bicycle?
No.
That was the dog.
We ended up with Rusty.
Yeah.
Was that what I wanted?
Was that your wish?
No, I can't.
That was a nightmare.
Boy, that was. You know, we got it was the cutest puppy you ever saw.
I know.
And it turned out to be the meanest green German Shepherd you could imagine. And no one could control him.
No, the mailman had to leave the mail next door. Do you remember our next door neighbor was Mrs. Brazil?
Brazil, and her son played. Oh, Avenue C. That's when the Brazil kids were. Remember, you go down the hill to the light.
Yeah.
And they were parked at the light, and Dad finally allowed me to drive our 41 holes to school, and I went chasing them down the hill and didn't realize they were stopped for a red light and smashed into them and smashed the whole front end of our 1941 holes.
And then you and Ronnie Seawright painted it.
Then,
Ronnie.
Remember that with the flames?
Flames.
And the teeth?
And
I remember that.
it was a jail thing on the back with the bars.
Do we have a picture of
and
that
Dad
anywhere?
yeah, I got pictures of that with Ronnie and the Bernie Franklin and Richard Franklin. And Dad's car went on the blink at one point, and we were living in Redondo, Avenue C, and he had the store in Long Beach, and for 2 weeks he had to drive that car to work, 30 miles each way.
What Oldsmobile was he driving at that time?
That was the 40, probably,
That was
could have been the 49 holes that I smashed up at Grand Canyon.
That's right. When you were a baby, Florence got married,
Yeah.
and Jerry and Dad and I flew out to New York to go to the wedding, and then we came back to Warren, and Uncle Nat had arranged to help Dad buy a car. It was cheaper to buy a car on the East Coast.
We bought it and picked it up in Detroit.
And then drove it home, and in the Grand Canyon you would go out. You always forgot something. You always had to go back to the parking lot, and you got nailed.
Yeah, I was 15, and he gave me the cars to open the door. I had never driven a car in my life. But I figured it's not hard, because this was an automatic, the first automatic. All you had to do was put... So I backed it out, and then I didn't know how to park it. I couldn't get in. I smashed the door.
It was awful.
And this was my father. He hadn't had the car a week. He'd waited through the whole war. You couldn't buy a car.
And then we made the rest of the trip in silence. Dad's way of dealing with this was not to talk. And it was horrible. And not only that, but he did not know how to turn off the heat. And there's that one trip where you go across the desert, which is pretty awful, and people used to get bags of water to put on the car to keep it cool. And this car, I think, even had air conditioning, but all he knew, he didn't know how to turn off the heat. So that was, he didn't talk, and we had the heat on. It was awful. It was not a good trip.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of the places that we lived?
Two come immediately.
Okay.
Sulphur,
Oh
Louisiana.
my God, how could we forget that?
And Bristol, Connecticut.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Sulphur, Louisiana, we lived on a farm. We lived on a farm.
A little house that the farmer rented to Mom and Dad.
And I mean, our backyard was the chickens and the pigs and all that. And the thing I remember about us was, I remember Mom would pack us a lunch, her sandwich, and we'd go walking off into the
Yeah.
fields, and we had to watch for the cows
Because we were afraid of the cows. And this is what I remember. What year was that? 41?
Well, probably
I was born
41,
in
42.
37. Would I have been about 7 then?
Yeah,
I was
7
7 years
or
old,
8,
and you
yeah.
complained to Mother. It was so hot.
Yeah.
It was in the summer, and it was in sulfur. And you probably don't remember this, but you complained to Mother and said, she's a girl, she has to wear a shirt.
I said that.
Yes, I remember that. That was one of the first sexist things that happened in my life that I remember.
It's funny that no vacation really rings out, and I'm wondering if I just didn't enjoy our vacations.
Or
No,
did we
we
take
didn't.
vacation?
Or
We
did we?
didn't take vacations.
Per se.
My memory is, I mean, anything that would be called a vacation was a trip, and it was
Yeah,
a trip
for a
to New
reason.
York to see the family, to New York City,
Yeah.
or later on a trip to.
Florida.
But for me, the vacations were every Wednesday. Dad got off work early, and we'd go to Lake Guilford,
Yeah.
and then every weekend and every summer, and Lake Guilford, going there and living in a space that was like camping.
It was
Yeah.
ongoing.
Yeah.
That was vacation, and everything else in life was work.
Uh-huh.
And that's my
They're-
memory.
yeah, they made life a vacation other than the
Yeah.
working part. That's
Yeah.
true.
And then there were family gatherings.
Yeah.
I remember.
Oh, and they were at the yeah.
I remember 2 family gatherings at Lorain, Ohio, with all the levees. And the one I remember, and sometimes I don't know if I remember things or I've seen photos of them, and I'm remembering the photo. But going to Lorain when they lived on Lake Erie,
Oh,
and
yeah.
everybody was there, all of our cousins. And even earlier than that, my earliest family reunion was when Aunt Sylvia lived across the street from fire station, and the babies were in a crib, and I wasn't a baby. The babies, I think, might have been Susie and Carol, and I was one of the big kids with Marcia and Jerry and Frank. Do you remember that at that
Yeah.
house?
Okay. I'm thinking of the house in Lorraine.
Okay.
Well, we went to visit them. Frank was like in high school, and I was about 5 years younger. And 2 things I remember. The garage. Frank would organize a show, a theatrical performance. And we all had to perform in it. And then he charged the neighborhood kids 2 cents a piece to come watch us.
Well, I came in and after the war, and the story that I heard was that, as you said, that you had each had your wish, and that you got the piano, you got the dog, and then the 2 of you cut out the little Gerber baby food pictures, and you made up announcements about the baby that was coming, and Mother wasn't pregnant yet.
Oh,
Oh boy.
I think it's a better
good
story.
story.
Some
She
stories
might
are better. It's a true story.
True Sweetler's story that doesn't quite. Okay.
It's a good one.
All right. I have that picture, that
Yeah.
card, the announcement. I don't remember Jerry until till Youngstown, and then it was mostly because we were in conflict over television use. I think you might have been responsible for my finally getting a Winky Dink screen, because Winky Dink, you'd have to get the answer, draw the lines, and if you didn't have a screen, you drew on the TV screen, and then that ruined your sports watching. And I do remember, Harriet was like my mother, sort of. I was your doll. I
Yeah,
mean, I
a
remember
baby.
playing in the backyard of Avenue C.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And I remember Mom taking me we'd have a thermos of cocoa and a thermos of coffee, and we'd walk down to the beach at Avenue C, and I guess it was so you guys could do your homework without me around.